Good morning. I want to introduce you to Martha Williams, soulfireassociates.com. And it's good to see you this morning. I know you are, from reading your website and from having spoken to you, I know that you wear many hats in terms of what you offer, in terms of healing and in terms of spiritual exploration. So I want to begin with a question, which is, what inspires the name Soulfire? It's a beautiful name, and I'm just curious where that came from.
Thank you. I would have to say, Leah, that takes me back at least 10, 12 years when I was first starting to conceive of this idea of sharing shamanic work along with teaching yoga and other just ways to support people's well-being and spiritual exploration development. And I was hearing a lot about Carl Jung at this point of my life and how he was looking at soul and spirit and how he sort of conceives of spirit and focusing on spirit in the spiritual realm as an effort of ascending, so rising up and sort of meeting up with higher, spiritual beings. And then he also very much focused on the soul, and the soul having to do with our time here on earth in these physical bodies as spiritual entities, as spiritual beings, but in these physical bodies having this human experience and fully having that experience, not trying to transcend the experience by, going upwards, but trying to strike a balance of both being in soul, working with soul, which is sort of grounded and going kind of deeper and kind of going down, if you will, into the depths of being, into the depths of parts of ourselves that we may not embrace. Some could say our shadow self. So I was really intrigued by this idea of soul and spirit and working with both and not trying to avoid by trying to ascend and transcend, but working with both and knowing that that work of the soul can be very rich. It can be very rich. I believe, as many do, that it's the work we're meant to do here on earth is the work of the soul that will help us then connect more deeply with spirit. And it's the work of the soul that it helps us to evolve and grow and expand. So that's where the soul piece came in. And then the fire, it just really all kind of came together. I'm pretty sure I did a shamanic journey to ask for guidance on what to name my business. And soul fire came to me. And it's also not a surprise that fire is there because my sun sign is Aries, so I'm a fire sign. I can be pretty fiery at times. And I just also loved the idea of fire because when we talk about shamanic work, I'm not healing you. If I'm working with you, I'm the catalyst. I'm sort of igniting the spark of your own healing capacity.
So in a certain way, igniting the fire in the soul.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yeah.
Yes. And when you talk about that the work is around the soul, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that and how the work that you do is that work, the work of the soul?
Yeah, again, I relate it to us very much being these human beings. And it's the work of our everyday emotion and experience. And it's about not getting caught up too much in emotions of anger and resentment and fear. Not that we don't feel them, not that we don't recognize them, feeling them, allowing them, seeing them in a way that we sit with them and not in them. and engaging with practices so that we recognize this human experience of all these different emotions and allowing them to sort of move through us. And then we kind of open up into a more expanded being. And so I see that as the root of a lot of what we struggle with in life. Finding a way to be with these difficult emotions of fear and anger and resentment and jealousy or what have you. And I think all these tools that shamanism brings to bear, that yoga, meditation, contemplation, prayer, help us with that. So that's what I sort of see as work of the soul. And when we tend to ourselves, in those experiences, sometimes those difficult experiences, we're kind of coming home to self. We're honoring spirit and soul, and then sort of expanding and evolving from there.
Thank you. How does yoga, first of all, how did you come to yoga as a practice, and how do you see it contributing to the work on the soul?
Well, I think for everybody, Leah, it's different. For me, I know that I've had my first yoga class in the late 1990s. So that was sort of just the beginning of the wave of yoga coming to the mainstream here in the US and in the Western world. Maybe it was farther along than the beginning of the wave, but it was the first class for me. And it was a free class that this yoga teacher offered at a gym that I was going to. She was in her yoga teacher training. She needed to do 4 free classes. So she offered them at this gym. And I thought it'd be a really good idea for me. I don't know why, but I thought it'd be a good idea for me. And I remember sitting in cross-legged position and having these thoughts go through my head of, you've got to be kidding me. This is supposed to be relaxing. This is supposed to be calming. This is so difficult. My hips are so tight. This is so uncomfortable. I've never forget that was my first experience of yoga. Fast forward a few years later, I had a couple of videotapes, if you remember the age of VHS and VCRs. And it was the Rodney Yee, Patricia Walden, AM, PM yoga. And I know that when I did that AM yoga practice, it was still a little hard for me because I was real tight. I was in my late 30s, early 40s. I never was really doing a whole lot of stretching. And I was working full time and, encountering daily stresses of work and life. And I knew how good I felt at the end of that tape. Again, I couldn't believe how challenging some of these postures were, just really basic postures, but my hamstrings were tight. My hips were tight. It wasn't easy for me, but I knew how good I felt at the end of it all. So I kind of kept at it with those videotapes. So that was really my first experience of yoga. And then not too long after that, I interviewed for a position at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. And it's a large retreat center. They've trained thousands upon thousands upon thousands of yoga teachers. So it's really kind of a mecca here in the United States for practicing yoga, learning to teach yoga. And I got the job, and that was in 2005. And again, I just had that little bit of experience of yoga. And I didn't know that yoga was more than just that physical practice of the postures, of the stretching and strengthening. And it wasn't until I started working there that I learned that yoga is this 8-limbed path, and that the physical practice, the postures, is just 1/8 of the yogic path. And I swear that if that was the case today, that if I was interviewing there and I only knew this, that I probably wouldn't have gotten the job, because many more people now know that yoga is much more than that, just that physical practice. So I started working there. I started going to the classes at Kripalu, I'd say easily twice a week, and they were 1 hour and 45 minutes, which was incredible. And I realized that they really helped me with my anxiety. They really helped me manage my stress. I felt better. I moved more fluidly. I slept better. And I felt great at the end of class because you had a really long relaxation because the classes were so long. And so it just became a part of my life. And I didn't even imagine I'd ever want to teach yoga until easily, 8 years of working there and practicing that I eventually came to this place of, yeah, I'd like to share this with other people. I'd like to do this more regularly in terms of sharing it with the world.
So when you say it's eightfold, one of the dimensions is the physical body, it sounds like. Can you just name what the others are?
Yeah. Let's see how my memory
Or
does.
some of them. It doesn't need to be all of them. It doesn't need to be all of them, but just
try
ones
for
that
8.
are important to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
The first one is the yamas and the niyamas. So it's these personal practices of how you treat yourself, basically, and how you treat others, how you conduct yourself in the world personally, and then how you engage with others. So ahimsa, non-harming, is a big one. Ahimsa we bring to the yoga mat. So we're not pushing or forcing, we're not hurting ourselves in the yoga practice. We're also not hurting others. So it's a path of nonviolence when you engage with ahimsa. So that's one example of a personal practice. How you engage with yourself and then how you engage with others. Yamas, niyamas. Pratyahara, drawing your senses inward. So I'm not doing them in order, but drawing your senses inward. Pratyahara. We are so drawn outward. Our attention, engagement are so drawn outwards. Our attention has been commodified, right? They know when you're on different social media platforms and advertisements how long your eyes pause. So it's about attention drawing inward, noticing inward sensation, noticing breath, noticing parts of your body. So attention drawing inward, pratyahara. Pranayama, focused breath work. So breathing deeply in through the nose, slow, steady breath out. It calms the nervous system. It helps you to draw your attention inward even more. It tells the body, the nervous system, that it's okay to shift from outward focus and fight or flight to inward focus and rest, relax. Asana, the physical practice. Dhyana, focusing breath, focusing on a point on the floor, focusing your attention on your breath, on a candle. And that leads to dhyana, the meditative practice, meditation. And all this is sequential, and it all sort of helps support the next step of your practice. So meditation, and then samadhi, bliss, oneness, recognizing your oneness, feeling that sense of oneness and connection with all that is, with the divine. And for the people who practice very intently, there are stories of them reaching samadhi and they just sort of freeze. And they're just in this altered state of complete and total bliss. Not everybody gets there in yoga class. For many, it's just this feeling at the very end of class, after you're in Shavasana, relaxation pose, you're resting, you're integrating, you're absorbing the benefits of your practice, and you often feel like you're either melting into the mat or that you could just sort of float away on a cloud. And that's that sense of bliss that you've reached.
Very beautiful. Thank you. I haven't heard the asanas elucidated like that. I mean, the steps and the practices. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah. And I believe I missed self.
So
but that's okay.
Somewhere, maybe one of them. So I'm also curious how you came to the shamanic path. So the yoga, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that has everything to do with working at Kripalu. at the time I was there. So Kripalu hosts all kinds of workshops and trainings and programs, including programs on shamanism. And at the time when I was there, we were hosting a very intensive shamanic training course that one of my colleagues was enrolled in. And she would come back after these trainings and she would talk about the experiences and the trainings, and it was fascinating to me. And she was also working with one of her students in the training. She was receiving shamanic healing from this man. And she was talking about those experiences. And again, it was just fascinating. And so I decided to sign up for shamanic healing sessions with this man. And I loved it. I was completely hooked from the first experience of working with this man and receiving shamanic healing. It felt relaxing. It felt otherworldly. He would talk about what he experienced. He would talk about what he saw in his mind's eye as he was working with me. He would talk about shamanism. It was just so engaging and interesting to me. And I loved how I felt afterwards. So I would, work with him once a month. And an interesting thing about that is that when we first started working together, he said, you know what you'd like to focus on? And at the time I was in my mid 40s and I'd never been married. And I said, I think I'm finally ready to, share my life with someone, find my life partner. And so that was the original intention. And then it sort of went into the background and we just sort of did the work that we did. But don't you know that I met my now husband within about 6 months of working with this man. So in the midst of all that,
do you attribute, yes. Do you attribute some of your shamanic work to the meeting, the synchronicity of meeting your husband? Is that what you're saying?
I do. I think it was a lot of things. I think timing is just about everything in life. I think a lot of the practices I was engaging with at Kripalu, the yoga, meditation, shamanism, the shamanic healing sessions. I started to go to a chiropractor when I was up there. I'd never gone to a chiropractor before. I was eating really healthy foods at Kripalu and sort of changing up my diet. And I think it was all those things helped sort of tip the scales in favor of me opening up and sort of maybe clearing some stuck energy and some beliefs that it would never happen, that I would never meet anybody. Those sort of got shifted and cleared. And I think my heart was like hugely opened as a result of all this work. And that got me to the place of sort of being open to attracting. I very much believe in the law of attraction, the idea that when we raise our vibration, we attract similar things, similar vibrations. Yes. And that we become a bit of a magnet when our vibration is raised. We're attracting those things we desire into our life.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And could you describe what a shamanic session might look like?
Absolutely. But just to sort of finish it all off, so I'm experiencing all this shamanism, and then I meet my now husband, we get married, I move up to Maine, and I wanted to find a community where I could do things like celebrate the winter solstice and the summer solstice and engage more deeply in this work. And I found out about a shamanic teacher up here in Maine. I enrolled in an apprenticeship course, a year-long course with her. And then I continued studying with her for another 2 years. And fast forward, I finally got to the place where I was ready to start working with clients. And then I started working with clients. So a typical session involves a lot of conversation initially, particularly if it's the first time I'm working with somebody, of getting clear on what are their spiritual beliefs, what can we call upon in the session if they believe in God, if they believe in the Holy Spirit, if they believe in Allah, if they believe in angels and ancestors, then we kind of call on those spiritual beings, those entities, to be with us in the work. And then we focus on intention. What's going on in their life? What would they like to see shift? What would the desired outcome from a session be? Are they looking for a greater sense of self? Are they looking to reduce anxiety and maybe depression? Do they have a frozen shoulder that nothing has worked to help release it? Are they simply interested in shamanism and connecting with the spirit world and deepening connection with the spirit world? So we get kind of clear on intention. And then the person lies down on a massage table. And if I haven't already created a sacred container, open up the directions, then I do that. And I rattle. And I honor the spirits of the east, spirits of the south, west, north, below, above, and within. And I'm calling on these spirits of the directions, and I'm inviting them into the space to create a sacred container. I'm calling on their wisdom, their protection, their presence to be available in the work we're going to do, and to create the safe, powered up space in which to do the work. And then I typically sit down next to the person, and if they're comfortable with physical contact, I have my hand on their arm and I put on a drumming track, and I'm listening to a drumming track, and that helps me get into this space of opening up to connect with the spirit world. And it sort of shifts you from left brain dominance, part of our brain that's all about focus and tasks and logic and reason, to the right side of the brain, the right hemisphere. That's more about intuition and opening up to connection and spirituality, and the things that the left side of the brain are not so focused on. So it helps you shift into an altered state. And from that altered state, from that open kind of place, I'm calling on my spirit teachers, my spirit helpers to work with me in partnership on behalf of the person. And I'm asking a question about what would be in this person's highest interest to know about, and then fill in the blank, what their intention is. And I prepare the client and I say, this is the intention, and spirit is now in charge. And I may get information about your intention. I may do energy healing or clearing or balancing work. Maybe there's a power animal retrieval that's in your highest interest, connecting you with an animal spirit that wants to be available to you in your day-to-day life, in your sleeping, your non-waking reality, to be available to you for guidance, empowerment, protection. So all kinds of things can happen, but as long as that intention is clear, and I'm asking what is in their highest good to know about this, then spirit kind of takes over. And every session is different. Sometimes it's crystal clear what is in that person's higher intention. Sometimes spirit is doing work on a level that I can't really verbalize, and that's not completely clear, but that's sort of seeding, in the person, and slowly developing and supporting them in their intention. And once I'm done, I let the person know that, we're finished. And when they're ready, they can sit up, and I take notes, and then I share with the person when they're ready what transpired, and then I answer any questions, and we talk about how they can integrate, what happened. Sometimes they're given homework, practices to bring home, a ritual to do at home, to support them in the work.
Yes. Yeah, it sounds very rich and very deep.
Yes, it can be. And it, sometimes depending on how open the person is, the work can be even deeper. And sometimes people are a little bit skeptical, and that's okay, you know? I give people tremendous credit for even stepping in the door, and being curious about it.
Yes. 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 And it sounds like there's many different, if we could call them techniques. I'm not quite sure what to call them. Techniques, methods, interventions, but and you as the practitioner would decide which one is appropriate for the person that you're working with.
Yes and no. I consider them practices. In fact, you know, that first year of training, the apprenticeship course, it's all about learning the core practices, core shamanic practices. And what I loved about learning these practices initially was learning that these practices are shared by shamanic communities around the world. And when you think about it, that shamanism is thousands and thousands of years old. So way before you had the phone, much less the internet, to share information. Shamans from Siberia were engaging with power animal retrievals and divination and energy balancing and clearing, just as shamans in Peru were engaged in those practices, thousands and thousands of years old. So we've identified, you know, these practices, these core practices have been identified and shared, and continue to be employed today. And I will have a sense often of what practice I might share with a client. They may come to me and say, I'd really like a power animal retrieval. And I always remind them that spirit's in charge and can intend to have a power animal retrieval. And that may very well happen if it's in their highest good. If it's not in their highest good, something else may happen. I may be led by spirit to engage in a different practice.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And speaking of that, all that shamanism has existed for thousands of years around the world, which is pretty astounding in itself. I read on your on your website that you've actually been to Peru and met or studied with a shaman in Peru. And I'm just curious what that was like. If you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 2007, I was still working at Kripalu, and I had been doing this work with the shamanic practitioner. I started that in like 2006, so I was still working with this person about once a month or so. And I heard about this trip to Peru that Alberto Violdo and the Four Winds Society was running. And my colleague, who was going through the training with him at Kripalu, told me about it. I'd never even heard of Machu Picchu. So people are saying, oh, Machu Picchu, I really want to go to, what's Machu Picchu? You know, so I look it up on the internet. Whoa, that's incredible. So then other friends in the department, I was working in a Kripalu, started to say, I'm going to go on that trip. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go on that trip. Because by then, I was really intrigued by shamanism and shamanic practice. So I spent about 10 days in Peru with this group of about 125 people or so. And we were in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And every day we would go to a different sacred site. And we were broken up into groups. And each bus had 2 shamans from Peru with you. So Alberto had made connections with these communities in Peru many years before. He was studying with some of these shamans from the mountains of Peru. And they had been given guidance that they were meant to share their practices with people outside of their communities. And so they started sharing their work with Alberto, and then Alberto was guided to share it with larger groups of people. So every day we'd go to a sacred site and be accompanied by these, at least 2 shamans. And they would lead ceremony at these sites. So we would be sitting around in a circle with these shamans. We would be receiving rites from these shamans, different initiatory rites, and engaging in these practices with them every day. And it was incredible. That Sacred Valley.
How so?
Well,
Yeah.
like it was on different levels. First of all, that place we were in the Sacred Valley. So we were about, I think, 2 hours north of Machu Picchu. And just this place was just kind of magical with these really soft rolling hills surrounding us. So we were truly in a valley. And so, I wake up in the morning and I see these rolling hills, and I just had a sense of being held by these hills. And then we'd have a morning yoga practice and this incredible breakfast, and get on the bus and go on these adventures to these sites that I knew nothing about. So we'd be learning about the sites on the bus ride, and as we were there, and just being in the presence of these shamans, it wasn't only just an honor. It was such a teaching for me about humility and openness. You could feel their openness and their love and their reverence for the land, which I didn't really learn very much. I mean, my dad was a gardener, so he loved, the natural world in that sense. And I did sort of by association. And I was raised Catholic. I had a good experience being raised Catholic and deepening my faith and spirituality and spiritual connection that way. But it didn't really include a reverence for the land, the way I saw these shamans live. So I know it was this one really hot sunny day, and somebody was handing out bottled water, and a shaman accepted a bottle of water. And before he took a sip of it, he gave some to the earth with a blessing. He just turned the bottle over and he gave some to the earth with a blessing to Pachamama. And that just really stuck with me. So it was just an experience on all levels that really resonated for me and just really fed me.
Sounds very beautiful. And I imagine that you've taken that back and it has become part of your work, part of your contribution in terms of what you learn there must come out in how you are with people and how you are with the work and how you are with the land. I imagine that some of that really stayed with you.
I'd like to think so. Yeah, I hope so. I know I certainly that focus on the land, on the earth.
Yes.
The idea that spirit is in all things. That's much, much more a part of my life these days as a result of all this learning and practicing. And
how beautiful. I also noticed on your website that you mentioned drumming circles and drumming. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about why drumming and why a circle and what happens?
Well, drumming's been a part of shamanic work and indigenous communities, again, for thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
For me, my experience of drumming is that it was a part of every class that I took on shamanism, either drumming or rattling. It's a way to open circle. It's a way to close circle in the sense of opening a gathering and closing a gathering. In some ways, it's about sort of like letting spirit know you're here, you're ready. You're kind of making a sound, you're sort of sounding, saying hello to spirit. You're marking again the beginning and the ending of a ritual, of a ceremony, of a gathering. And then when you're a shamanic practitioner, that drumming is an important part of the work because, again, it's that repetitive sound that helps you shift from left brain to right brain. It's an entrainment. So the more you do
I
it,
see.
the easier you shift to that place of opening and connecting to the spirit world.
Mm-hmm.
And your drum becomes a tool when you're doing shamanic work. It's part of your toolbox. Sometimes you can just drum over a client, and that vibration is healing combined with the intention. So it's like sound healing.
Mm.
And then when you're in a drum circle, again, typically there's an intention. And then that vibration of all these drums in rhythm, in sync, can be very powerful and very healing. Again, because of the vibration, because of the intention. And then if you're calling in spirit at the same time, that just amps up the
It amps
power
it up.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Christine Stevens does a lot of work. If you're interested in anybody out there watching and listening, if you're interested in drumming, the power of drumming, the healing power of drumming and drum circles, she's done a lot of work, a lot of studying and teaching about
Mhm.
drum circles.
And is she a local person, or is she somebody that you can find online? How would one access her?
You can find her online. I think she's based out of Colorado, and she probably, tours and teaches, but yeah, online.
Yes.
I believe it's Dr. Christine Stevens, Stevens.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I noticed from reading your website again that you've studied with many people. And I assume gathered different perspectives from all the different people.
Yeah,
that you studied with.
Absolutely. Like in anything in life, like some say, we meet the teacher we're meant to work with at a certain time of our life. And I had that
Yes.
great fortune of working at Kripalu and being exposed to all kinds of teachers, all kinds of ideas and thoughts and practices. And my first exposure was with Alberto Violdo and the Four Winds Society. I took a class with Deborah King, who's another very, very gifted shamanic practitioner and teacher. Linda Fitch with the Four Winds Society, I took a class with her. Dory Cody led the shamanic apprenticeship course up here in Maine and the 2-year initiation program I went through. Very, very solid, grounded teacher with a lot of knowledge and integrity. Sandra Ingerman, I've never had the good fortune of being with her in person, but I've taken online classes with her and read her books.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. So you've really, really dived in. Yes. So is there anything else you would like to share? Anything that I haven't asked about?
I would say that I would invite people to sort of follow whatever it is that's catching their eye and sort of drawing their interest. Because I know for me, that's brought me to these really wonderful experiences of either working with a practitioner or going on a trip to Peru or studying with different people or deepening my practice and doing this work. And it's never proved me wrong. It's always served me well. And it's also just in general an important way to live life, paying attention to that internal compass, that internal navigation system, kind of to be anchored with it. And that's something that yoga can help with. You had asked Leah about, how yoga supports you on the path. Let's say spiritual exploration and connection and development. Yoga kind of brings you back to yourself, brings you back to your body, helps you to kind of, again, draw your senses within. And when you do that more and more often, it's easier to come back, and you're kind of anchored within, as opposed to being at the will of the forces externally, which these days they're more chaotic and
Yes.
frantic and unstabilizing, destabilizing than ever. So I
Yes.
feel like we're being called, we're being offered an invitation more and more to engage
Yeah.
with practices that bring us back to ourselves, and then to these kind of very interesting and enriching realms that support us in our day-to-day life.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
My
And
pleasure.
thank you for sharing your wisdom here.
You're welcome.
So you're very welcome. Really good to speak with you. So I'm going to end now.